Good evening. I can see that we've got about 25 guests who've joined us. So I'd just like to say that I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar to celebrate International Women's Day. We meet at a time where international unity and conversation are at a premium. My name's Dawn Harrison, and I'm a non-executive director of H&H Group. And we're extremely excited about hosting this webinar, Embracing Change and Seizing Opportunities. I'll be chairing the panel, and I'm thrilled to introduce our three panelists, who for me represent the engine room of our rural economy and our rural communities. Having spoken to them, I know that they will really welcome interaction. So I'd like to encourage you to post questions in the Q&A box, and there will be about 15 minutes at the end for Lisa, Jane and Kim to respond to those questions. So pardon me, the format will be that each of our panelists will present for about 15 minutes. If you can post your questions in the Q&A box, pardon me, and then we'll address the questions at the end. So we're hoping to finish at around about 8 p.m. In the meantime, if you have any issues with you can't hear us or can't see us or you can't see the slides, then if you pop those in the chat, we'll try to address them immediately. Okay, so I'd first like to introduce Lisa, who joins us from Bristol and who is going to explain the nature of her business and how the values influence how it operates and the targets that they set for themselves. So welcome, Lisa.
I work for Canopy Stars, which is a marketing and booking agent for glamping. And I'm just going to talk you through sort of about what we do and how we help people create amazing spaces in the great outdoors. So Canopy Stars inspect and select the most inspiring places to stay in the great outdoors for those in search of a life more wild. We connect people with nature, we promote sustainable travel, positive environmental action, and we mainly work with small-scale independent owners who are diversifying their land. So people who want to who love where they live and they want to share it with people. So just as a little sort of overview about who we are. So we are the leading marketing booking agent. We've been around since 2010. We have over 850 spaces in our collection, including spaces like tree houses, cabins, yurts, all kinds of variety of spaces. We are part of the Sordays family. So Sordays has been around for 25 years and it's a B Corp certified travel company. We've got a score of 96, which makes us in one of the top 5% of the B Corps in the world. So we really are invested and dedicated to responsible travel. And in fact, we recently employed a sustainability manager to keep us on track. We have a consultancy element as well, so we can help people create these spaces in nature, and we support our owners from start to finish. And we have an owner retention rate of 98%. In a nod to International Women's Day, Sordays is made up of 71% women. Half of our leadership team is women, and 3 out of our 7 board members are women, including the chair. So we like to think that we do things a bit differently from other people out there. We inspect and select every space that joins our collection. We accept less than 20% of people who apply. We are an employee-owned company. So 52% of the company is owned by the employees. So we're all very much invested in what we do and what we're trying to achieve. 24% of our company is actually a charitable trust, and we give back to environmental causes. We've pledged to plant 1 million trees by 2025, and we've committed to a net zero carbon policy by 2030 through a reduction strategy rather than offsetting. So, I mean, by its very nature, glamping is quite a low impact travel, connecting people to nature, but we really want to keep pushing ourselves and make sure that we're doing the best we can. So as an industry, glamping is growing. It's grown year on year since we began in 2010. There's about 1.3 million searches on Google every year for glamping. 2020 and 2021 were phenomenal years, obviously for obvious reasons with the pandemic. And we saw that increase in 50% in 2020 and further 22% in 2021. So there was significant demand for people to find interesting places to stay in nature. Even before the pandemic, things were growing, and now coming out of the pandemic, we're still seeing significant strength in the market. So when people think about, the interesting thing about glamping is it's not necessarily location based. Whilst the usual suspects are still very popular, you know, Cornwall, Devon, Yorkshire, Northumberland, people also come glamping looking for experience-based holidays. So we have collections in on our site, like by the water and on the coast. And these are people often start their search that way. So it's not always about where you're based, it's about what you can offer people. So the people that go glamping, so our audience is made up of people aged 25 to 45, predominantly female. They mainly come in couples, and they have a reasonably high income. Loyal customers tend to have over £45,000 income annually. They are mainly based in cities, and that's what the appeal of coming glamping is. They want to get out of cities, go spend some time in nature with their loved ones. When we've recently surveyed our guests and find out what they're looking for, why they go glamping, what's important to them. 70% of guests cited walking, exploring the local area as their preferred activities. Comfort is also important. So whilst it is seen as a nature-based, they're still looking for something that's quite comfortable to stay in. Being responsible consumers is also important. Ethical and sustainable travel choice was a reason why people go glamping. And they tend to book for special occasions. So it's a treat. People see it as a treat option. And also they look for trust and quality, which is why they kind of come to Canopy and Stars and people to help them select places to stay. So within the glamping industry, there's obviously the variety of different place types that you can have. And I thought I'd just run through a few bits of potential revenue. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that actually, so these are our most popular space types. We've got tree houses, cabins, bothies, shepherd huts and bell tents. The average night across the whole of our collection is £168 per night people are spending to stay in one of our spaces. It does vary quite widely across the collection. So bell tents, kind of the lowest value space, is £122, up to tree houses averaging at £249 a night. And they are still achieving high occupancy rates. I mean, you can see the difference between 2019 and 2021. Obviously, 2021 was an exceptional year, but I mean, it's still growing, and we can achieve high occupancy rates with a high average value. So it is important to work out, to point out that actually there is investment behind all those products as well. So a treehouse, a shepherd's hut would cost you around sort of £40,000 to produce. A treehouse would cost you around £150,000 to produce, maybe even more. But the return on investment will be kind of similar. So what we tend to see is that people are kind of, the return on investment's coming in about 3 to 3.5 years. And then obviously from then on, the income coming in from a treehouse is significantly higher than the other space types. So it all depends on your initial outlay, but the return tends to be about the same amount of time. So tree houses are still the most popular space type that we have in our collection. 7 out of the top 10 spaces in the collection were tree houses. They achieve about 33,000 page views per month. They can command really high rates. People really love the romanticism of a tree house. They go back to their childhood. They have these images of being in the trees and being young, and they're willing to pay for it. So we have tree houses in the collection that are charging sort of £300,000 to £450,000 a night. We only have about 60 in the collection at the moment, and I mean the interest in them is not waning at all. This is an example of one of the tree houses. This is Fallow Tree House. It's in Hampshire. It's on a site. It's in a vineyard. They have 4 tree houses. Each one of them achieved over £80,000 worth of bookings in their first year. So cabins are a great space type. So they are the second highest searched space type that we have in the collection. We, as a culture, the UK, we don't really have cabin culture. So in Scandinavia, lots of people have their own cabins and they go to on the weekends. In North America, they have the same. We don't really have the space for that in this country. Not everybody can have their own cabin to go to. So people like to go to other people's cabins for the weekend. And that's where we come in. We help with that. So the beautiful thing about cabins is they can be so varied. I mean, you can see here, for example, the one at the bottom left, that's Humblebee, and it's shaped like a beehive, and it's constantly getting picked up for press. People love it for its individuality. And then there's the top one, the Calm. That's relatively new to the collection. It joined last year. We know the people who built it, and within the first 8 weeks, it took £50,000 worth of bookings. So there is extremely high demand for a well-designed, well-thought-through space that really helps people get into nature and just be in the surroundings that they wouldn't normally be in. So this is an example of the best performing cabin that we have in the collection. It's called Notting Hill Barn House. It's in Leicestershire. It sleeps 8. The reason why this one is so popular is it is its own little area and there's nobody else around for miles, but they also really focus on the experiences and offer. It's got like a wood-fired hot tub, it's got a wood-fired pizza oven, it's got a lake with some boats that you can go paddling on, and they really have thought about everything that you might need, and so it's extremely popular, and it makes a fabulous income. It achieves about £80,000 worth of bookings a year. And then an emerging kind of trend is barns and boffies. So glamping is predominantly, like historically, people think of glamping as kind of tents and canvas structures. But what we found over the past 12 years is actually what people are really looking for is that connection to nature. And so the structure that they're in, as long as it has a good connection to the place that they're in, isn't as important. So we've seen a lot of people kind of converting buildings and stone structures that they had on their land, and they're proving to be really popular. We've had a 30 to 40% increase in winter bookings year on year. So these structures are more appealing to people wanting to go away in the winter. And for our owners that we're working with, it's a really, really useful way of like utilizing existing structures on their land, as long as they have that connection. And here's an example. This is an interesting example, actually. So this is the Boffey at High Barn. So this space was always built for 2 people, and they've recently almost extended it and to make it bigger. So now it sleeps 6 people. But because it was so popular that they wanted to allow it to more people to join in. So they're the kind of the key space types that we work with. But it's not just about the space types of glamping. It's about the experiences that people have when they're there. So that's what people are looking for. They want sort of mini experiences that when they go home, that's what they remember and they tell their friends about. It's about, you know, sitting out by the campfire in the evening, toasting the marshmallows, watching the bats fly overhead. It's that kind of glamping mentality. So some of the key trends that we find in the market that are useful for people when they're building spaces to think about. So as occasion stays, so 50% of our bookings are for occasions, birthdays, anniversaries, any kind of special occasion, really. And the beautiful thing about occasion stays is they do withstand market recessions, because people are always willing to find money for a special occasion, and so that's why we encourage people to think about additional features that could be appealing to people who are looking for a special occasion stay. So whether that's outdoor bathing or some sort of communal area, if it's a group space, all things to sort of consider. Talking of outdoor bathing, hot tubs and outdoor baths is a phenomenal interest to our guests. There's 21,000 searches on our website every month for hot tubs, and they reach about 40% of all our collection views are for hot tubs. And obviously, there are pros and cons of these things. They use a lot of water. There's a lot of considerations around them these days. but they do increase bookings. We've had spaces that didn't have hot tubs and then added them, and we saw their bookings go up by 25%. For Canopy and Stars, we always recommend the wood-fired hot tubs and not the chemical ones, just because it also kind of reflects the glamping ethos of having to slow down. There's no quick win with a wood-fired hot tub. You have to invest in it. It takes a good 4 hours to get warm. You need to be in the moment, and that's kind of what a Canopy and Stars and the glamping stay is all about. But they're not for everybody. So some of our owners decide not to go for the hot tub route and choose other options. And some of them are extremely creative options. So this is a site that's got a horse box sauna that they created, and that's up in Scotland. And then we have another site in Herefordshire, and they created an outdoor cinema that guests on their site can go and spend time in. So there's plenty of ways of trying to engage that occasion market and draw people in to get the bookings. Another key trend, dogs. I don't know if anybody was aware of the increase in dog ownership over the past couple of years, but they're everywhere. There's 12.5 million dogs in the UK. 1 in 3 households now has a dog. Our dog-friendly collection seen a 43% increase. In fact, so much so that the Store Days family, we launched our own dog-friendly holiday website called Pause and Stay, which kind of goes above and beyond just accepting dogs and really welcomes dogs. And so that's, we look for spaces that welcome dogs as well. Another trend is wellness. Wellness tourism is growing twice as fast as global tourism. In 2020, the non-profit organisation Global Wellness predicted a growth of 7.5% in wellness tourism, faster than the 6.4% growth in overall tourism. I mean, it's a big key trend, and post-COVID, it's kind of almost more important than ever. People really understand the value of time in nature and of personal health, and so lots of our spaces that have wellness elements do really well with picking up people looking to take that extra kind of break during a break. And ecotourism as well. As I've already mentioned, being an ethical and sustainable travel choice is the most important factor to guests when asked about why they book with, why they shop with Canopy and Stars. And it is something that we're seeing growing. People are questioning a lot of the fundamentals about travel and tourism. And so we work with low impact build structures and operations. We recommend renewable energy, we source locally. It's gone beyond a necessity, and it's a trend that people are willing to pay for. So we really encourage our owners to make sure that the spaces that they're growing are building are ticking those boxes. And talking about encouraging our owners, we do have a consultancy service, and so we help people with an idea turn it into reality. We can support with any kind of elements that people might need help with, when thinking about adding a glamping structure or similar to their site. We could help with help people understand the viability of their project, planning support, planning applications, design, even build. We offer a bespoke service to meet anybody's needs. This space here that you can see is called Two Pines. It's a tree house. It's in Northamptonshire. We helped create this. So we met the owners at the Farm Innovation Show in 2019 and did an initial viability assessment for them. We went to their site. We helped with the planning process of a planning support letter. We helped them apply for their RDPE funding. It only went live in the collection on the 2nd of March this year. So it was a big moment for all of us, actually. And it's already taken 18 bookings. It's just taken over £10,000 worth of bookings. And the owners are just delighted because they had the vision and it turned into this, and they're already welcoming their guests. So I feel like I've talked really fast, and I'm really sorry. So the final thing I want to kind of leave you with is just the thought that it's all about pushing boundaries. Like, we're living in a very visual marketplace. So glamping, it is almost a way of life for us anyway. But the places that do really well are the ones that really spark the imagination. And people can't imagine, they want to be somewhere where they imagine that nobody else has ever been before. So this is the Beer Moth in Scotland. It's obviously a truck converted, and you can stay in it. And then there's the Midsummer Moor bed, which is just a bed. You can sleep under the stars on the moor on Dartmoor. There is a cover, you can't quite see it in this picture, so you don't get rained on, but it's a very, like, people love it for the fact that you do get woken up by the birds. And then or you can just make it a UFO type shape. This one's in the Scandinavia. So they love a crazy camping space in Scandinavia. So yeah, so I hope I've kind of given you a bit of inspiration, something that you might be able to do if you had any inclination. But yes, we're always open to ideas and suggestions, and we'd love to help chat through any ideas you might have.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for outlining Canopy and Stars and all of the thinking that goes into that. I absolutely love the way that you know the names of these properties. They just came to life when you were talking about them. So thank you very much for that. I have spotted that a number of people have joined after we started the session. So just want to reiterate that there is a Q&A box. If you would like to pose any questions in there, then we will address them after our three panelists have spoken. So please can I introduce Jane Earl, who is a dairy farmer, and Jane's going to add to tonight's discussion by outlining her role and the challenges and opportunities that this presents, including external factors such as public perception and also challenges of substitutes. So, hand over to Jane.
Thank you. It's a real great opportunity that H&H have given us on International Women's Day to chat through some things, and I hope I'm going to cover some of the challenges that the dairy industry faces at present, but I don't think I can fix it all in 15 minutes, but certainly I will try and raise the profile of some of them. Just a little bit of background about myself. I currently live in Shropshire. I was born in Cheshire and brought up on a dairy farm. Whilst I'm not currently an active dairy farmer, that is what I've done for all my working life. I was very fortunate when I left school. You had to do a year's experience before you went to college. I desperately wanted to go to agricultural college. And I was fortunate to work for the Brown family near to Holmes Chapel. And Ray in particular really ignited my interest in pedigree cows, in cows in general. And he was really instrumental in probably what I've done for the rest of my working life, whether he realises it or not. And I will come back to the Brown family actually, because they've really moved their business from when I was there. They milked 80 cows, and they've moved it forward and changed completely what they do, but I will come back to that later on. So after I went to Reed Heath College, I went back home, but I also went out working to shows, clipping cows, doing sales, anything really that involved cows, and a bit of travel, and had great opportunities. You know, the Royal Show, which unfortunately is no longer there. I experienced quite a lot of that going forward, which was great. Made me get out there, meet people that I wouldn't have met actually, and people from all over the country that descended into Stoneleigh, people that I wouldn't have met if I had just stayed at home dairy farming. So for various reasons, my brother took over the tenancy at home when that time came. So I decided that I would go out and keep going through the dairy industry. So I had various opportunities to work with some great herds of cows. I worked for the Pilkingtons at Aintree in North Wales, and more recently I have been a mile down the road working for the Whitfield family for the last 5 years, where I've managed the herd there until they were dispersed last October. The milking herds, the young stock were retained, and we're continually selling those as they calve in. Outside that, I've been chairman of the Shropshire Holstein Club, which is not only just for Holstein enthusiasts, but very much as a social for people, like-minded people. And that again gives us a chance to travel. We do study tours. We've been all over the UK and into Ireland. We're still trying to get back into Ireland after COVID. But that also is a great organisation for young people. The Holstein Breeders, I can't emphasise enough. That's also been instrumental. My daughter's 12 and she has had a lot out of it. She can go now to the Albriton Calf Show, and she knows people from all over the country. And I think that's a massive opportunity for them, because then going forward, when they come to look into careers and things, they've met people from other parts of the country. They've also met sponsors and people that that probably will remember them if they've made the right impression. And so you never know where it takes you. And certainly that's been my experience when I was fortunate enough to be young enough to be in Holstein Breeders. So we do have a small herd. My husband Phil, my daughter Isla and I, we have a few Holsteins and Jerseys, which we're very fortunate that we have friends close by. Our milkers are looked after by the Whittaker and Doherty families, about 5-6 miles from here, and our young stock just where I used to work at Whitfield. So we do have our own cattle, which we really enjoy marketing and showing, and that's a real family hobby of ours. So the picture that's on the screen is a real favourite of ours, a cow that we have at work, and my daughter's just taken in the fields a couple of summers ago. So I'm going to go on to what I think are the challenges, or some of the challenges. I think the list is pretty endless, but I just wanted to focus on a few. The main one, and something that I've really come across recently a lot, is staff retention and recruitment. There's a massive shortage across lots of sectors of staff, and agriculture, for various reasons, that the hours and sometimes the incentives doesn't attract people, and doesn't attract young people. So going forward, a concern I know myself and several people in the industry would have is, where are the workers of the future going to come from? And I think staff recruitment, I think you have to be very flexible when you're looking for people, if they want to do like job shares or part-time. I think that's something you have to really work with, because if they're committed to you and they can cover things, maybe the answer is to have more part-time self-employed people than full-time people, that you might have to find accommodation for. So I think then the other thing to look at is incentivization, really. You know, you hear of people giving shares of farming, you know, whether that be in stock, and they buy into stock to keep people in the business and keep them incentivized, a bit like Lisa was saying, the employees being part of the business. I think that's something that farming really is going to have to get its head around. As training also, I think sometimes people just expect people to know what to do, and some of the best people might be those that have no experience because they've got no bad habits. So maybe those are the people we should look to, but we have to appeal to those people. And so that comes back to public perception, which I'll go into in a minute. The next thing that I think is vitally important, of course, is income and expenditure. The milk price at the moment is as high as it has been for a long time. But unfortunately, this is also a very volatile market we're in for all those things like fertilizer, wheat, everything that you might need in those inputs. You know, I only today, a farmer that I was speaking to, between last week and this week, fertilizer £200 increase. Where will it stop, really? You know, I think it's just massive at the moment. You know, the milk price has been too low for too long, and we've all said, you know, if you put 5 pence on in the supermarket, the consumer wouldn't notice, because if you watch a consumer in a supermarket, they just go and get it off the shelf. because they want to buy the product. So the next thing I wanted to speak about was public perception. This has obviously been in the news recently with the Panorama programme, and you know, it's a real uphill struggle when you get something like that that the public sees, and how do we get around that? You know, how do we get over that? You know, there is things like Open Farm Sunday, but it's getting people to come to those things, and also it's getting the farmers to open their farms to that. And especially when there's programs like there was, it makes people very nervous about these things. And at the end of the day, you know, most people have a camera in their pocket nowadays, and that's what farmers are concerned about, you know. And I think it's up to us to try and, through social media, there's lots of really good people online that are trying their best to get out there and really, not just in dairy farming, but in all sorts of country. You know, there's a lot of shepherdess ones I'm sure you've come across, farriers. There's lots of Instagram and posts that are really interesting to follow, even if you're in a dairy industry. So I think also schools is massive, you know, whether that be schools coming to you, and I know there's health and safety issues, or you going to schools, because my experience when we're at shows and things, and we'll be milking our cows at the end of the show, and you'll get children come up and they're really interested. When we go to Shrewsbury, it's right in the middle of the town, and they're really interested, and they can't get over the fact that milk is warm when it comes out of a cow. They think just expects it to be cold. So my daughter actually quite enjoys talking about these things to people. She's quite, you know, sometimes children are the best educators, I think. So I think we've got a lot to learn. I don't have all the answers, but I think there's definitely opportunities. Adding value, I said I'd go back to the Brown family. They expanded their cow numbers, and the milk price was on its knees, you know, and they looked at other opportunities. They've started off with a milk vending machine and milk round. They've now expanded that into ice cream, and you know, they've got a massive following on social media, but they're also putting back they host events where they plant trees, carol services, things for the local community. And I think that's a really good way of getting into, you know, they farm Holmes Chapel, quite an urban area, although they're on the edge of that, and so south of Manchester really. So they're pulling into people that are interested in coming and seeing. So they have calves that people can see, goats, Highland cows, whatever, but it gets people in there, and that's a really good way of educating people too. I couldn't really do this talk and not talk about milk alternatives. When I went on the BBC Good Food just to have a look how many there was, so there's 16 non-dairy, so that doesn't include like goat, sheep milk. There's a lot of nuts alternatives in there. I'm not going to call them milk because I think they're more juice than milk, but whilst, you know, there are reasons why people might need to have these alternatives, you know, there's also a massive opportunity, I feel, for us to, on food miles, sustainability, and also from a nutritional point of view, to sell our products. And at the end of the day, 87% of households buy meat every week, and 95% of them buy dairy products. So we're, you know, that number hasn't decreased, especially not in the last 2 years. If you look around, you know, there's a lot of vending machines around. There's one not far from us. They put one in a hut on the end of the drive, and then they built another one, and added produce to that. So there's a massive opportunity there if you're in the right location to sell your product direct. You also, of course, it depends on your milk contract. I want to touch a little bit on succession. You know, there's a lot of farmers currently that are going out for various reasons, whether it's staff, sometimes it's just there's no one to carry on. But there is people like myself probably that would love that opportunity. And I think that at the moment there is those opportunities out there. And so I would say to anybody that's in that sort of age bracket, you know, we are an aging industry. If you look at the average age of farmers, it's increasing, it's not decreasing. And that's quite a scary fact in itself. So I do think that people have to look outside the box a little bit. There's lots of different share farming options out there if people want to look for them. I think actually at the moment there's massive opportunity. So the last one, and I'm not a guitar player, it's just the icon that came up, but I think hobbies is a massive thing that you must think about. So if you want to go on to the next screen, please. So for us as a family, we like to go out showing cows, which is lovely on a sunny day. My daughter on the left is quite keen on her jerseys. She's got her own. It's also a source of income for her. She'd quite like to do something in medicine, and it might help just fund her in that direction when she gets to university. It's a great boost, you know, on a cold winter's day, to think, oh, you know, maybe we can get this out and show other people what we're doing and what we're, you know, it's just an incentive really. So it's a family hobby. My husband there with the shades on, it was a really nice summer's day in Shropshire that day when we were showing this. It's a social for us as well. It's what we do at weekends. But also, I think it's really important to get off the bank, as people say, off the farm, and get out there, whether that be to a meeting. And you know, this dark nights, you don't really feel like it, but from a mental health point of view, it's really important to get out to those meetings and meet like-minded people, share the bad things as well as the good things. Because it really, and you share ideas as well. So, and also it's quite nice, I think it's completely different. So if you go on to the next slide, if you know you really want to do something completely different, this is what I do. So I quite like making cakes, and I quite like doing wedding flowers. And one lady I was talking to at an event not so long ago, she said, "Oh, you're the wedding flower lady." And then I explained to her that I actually milk cows, that's what I do. And she was completely like taken aback. She thought I was a florist. So it's quite nice to have something like that. I'm not sure I could do it as a career, but too many bridezillas maybe. But as hobbies, it's quite nice to have something completely different when you take your wellies off and just, you know, let your mind take you where you want to with your imagination. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I'm very much looking forward to judging at Carlisle later in the week. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you for sharing your enthusiasm and your experience and presenting what is a complex industry in a very balanced way. I also thought it was really interesting that you pointed out the importance of providing structures for young people to get involved in the industry. So thank you very much for sharing those insights.
Thank you.
So we are now passing on for Kim Howard, who is the operations manager at Braid's Dairy Farm, and she's going to talk to us about what makes barista milk special and how this might tie in to the green agenda. Over to you, Kim.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. And I think I'll probably touch on a couple of areas that perhaps Jane has covered in her talk as well. But yeah, so Braid's farm dairy, and I'll move on to the first slide from there. So we are a very small family-run dairy farm based in the Lune Valley in Lancashire. We have 8 members of staff. There's currently myself in the dairy side, and then we have a team of 7 farmers that farm 350 acres, and we have about 400, approximately 440 cows, and that's a mixed breeds of Jersey and Holstein cows, which I'll come on to why in a bit. I joined the family business about 7 years ago. I don't come from an agricultural background at all. And I used to work for Lancaster University Management School, working with small businesses and looking at how we could help them grow and running programs for them. And Joe Towers, who used to work alongside me in the dairy, he'd come in to the family business on the dairy side. One of the other brothers, Ed, had come into the farming side. He'd come onto the course to look at sort of ideas and network with people and looking at ideas into the company, and that's how we met. And he then convinced me to come and work with him alongside him on the dairy, as he was looking at moving the business perhaps in a slightly different direction. So this is where we were sort of when I joined them. It was a very traditional business. We had local milk rounds that were established through the father John, really successfully over the years, to local businesses, restaurants, coffee shops, and we pulled our milk and we own labelled it. But when I joined them, it really was probably where the milk market had hit rock bottom. And it was testament to the Towers to actually taking me on, because I think probably it was kind of a turning point for the family on actually, the sons didn't want to be in the business and run it in the way that it was being run at that time. It wasn't that attractive for them. It was obviously quite a stressful time as well, because you've run something successfully and all of a sudden it was almost like a race to the bottom for the price of your milk. It was washed with milk, and I think the family agreed together that they needed to look at some innovation within the company. They didn't want to continue to produce a product that somebody may or may not want. And so they started to look at actually, could they take some risk and invest in it and look at producing a product that somebody was interested in and that had a demand for it, which would help them sort of ride out some of the peaks and troughs of the dairy industry. So you could sort of set a price and that keeps it level. So that's where our barista milk came into play. So I'll move the slides along from there. So the Barista Market was our market, and baristas in general, our market is mainly down in London, so very urban. A lot of people haven't actually stepped foot onto a farm, and I think when I joined the business, it's quite we've come really far removed from where our food comes from, and it's really difficult if you're not in farming circles to have access to that. Baristas as a market of people, they're really passionate. They go to great lengths to source coffee from all over the world, and they pride themselves that they actually build relationships with the farmers. They know exactly where those coffee beans are coming from. They want to know how it's grown. They want to know if there's ethical values in there. And then they share that actually out within the coffee community. They like to sort of shout about it and take pride. And when we came into the market, which was probably about 5-6 years ago, for coffee shops in the UK, we like milky drinks. They're sort of 80%, 90% made up of milk. And there wasn't really a product out there that they had the same passionate about to add to that coffee beans. So that's where the barista milk came in, and we did a lot of research. We spoke to a lot of scientists. There are scientists that actually study what a perfect milk for coffee is, and sort of re-engineered the product in actually that's our market. What do they want from a milk that you would use in a coffee shop? And we sort of worked it that way. And we looked at the sort of credentials that they would want. So we took a risk. We adapted our way of farming. I'll sort of move slides along so you can see. So we had a traditional black and white herd, and then one of the, so obviously black and whites, they're great. They produce a lot of milk, but for a coffee milk that is consistent and has rich flavour, and it's not necessarily all about the barista milk, so I won't go too much into the science of it, but we needed a cow that had a really rich, sort of creamy, high butter fat, which came from the Jersey herd. So bless them, the farming team introduced a herd of Jerseys, which came with its own challenges and joys as well, I have to say. And so we now have the 2 herds on the farm, and we introduced that milk. And we had a big challenge really on our hands. I think a lot of people thought it was a gimmick, and that actually, you know, milk is just milk. How can you build quality into it? And I think when the baristas started to use it and see that actually when it was heated, it was acting differently, and it was ticking all their boxes, you know, they were able to train other baristas up without any problems in the milk foaming. It was stable. It produced a really nice velvety texture. Demand started to grow on that level, which was just fantastic. And then we sort of also, we'd segregated our milk as a result of it. We had full traceability on that product, so we knew exactly what we were doing on farm all the way from the cow to the cup. And that kind of got us in touch with our market, if you will. So that sort of importance of producing a product that somebody wanted, actually, the more that we started talking to our customers and inviting them to come to the farm, it helped us, you know, look at the way we farmed, and perhaps, you know, we were able to then make changes to that. And one of the main things that we were seeing was that actually for the first time, our main competitor in that market wasn't actually other dairy milks that were trying to come in at a cheaper price. It was, as Jane alluded to earlier, you know, we were seeing that there was a rise in plant-based alternatives that were pitched at being more environmentally friendly. And not only that, there were people in the coffee shops that were willing to pay a premium of about 30 pence to 50 pence per cup, not per litre, on that product. And the reasons for choosing that weren't just for vegan reasons and for animal welfare. It was because of that environmental factor. And when we started sort of talking to them, there were a number of people that actually were drinking it and weren't actually enjoying the taste of it as well. You know, it was quite an eye-opener that there was actually something that we could do within the industry and within our farm to produce a milk in a way where people felt good when they were drinking it, you know. And Joe, who was in the dairy side with me, he's very very academic, really loved finding out about trends and looking at innovation. And so he started to look at methane, which was probably one of the biggest contributors in our industry. He started to look at seaweed in that field, and something called Asparagopsis taxiformis. He was awarded a Nuffield scholarship to go and investigate that. And I think it became apparent quite early on that actually as an available product that we could use, it wasn't going to be ready for at least sort of 10, 20 years as a solution to what we were looking for. But through his research, we did come across a Swiss company called Mutral. And they had, spent a number of years trialing out a natural feed supplement. It's made up from bioflavonoids of citrus and garlic. And you feed it to your cows, and it neutralizes the gas that's in the cow's rumen. And they were at a stage where they'd had really good success in laboratory conditions. Sorry, my mother's cat has just come into the room. I need to shush. They were looking for a commercial farm that they could then trial this out on. And so we were both, as two companies, probably at a similar stage of wanting to be able to work in synergy together to look at what the opportunities were for this. So back in sort of 2017, 2018, we started feeding Mootral to our herd, and we had an 8-week study period. And we managed to reduce the carbon emissions, or the CO2 equivalent, by 30% from that trial. And we've been feeding the Mootral to our herd ever since. You know, it's really exciting as a solution for us. And you know, the more that we were speaking to our market, the more that we could see that actually they were really interested in this as an angle to our business. At the time, so Mootral as a solution to climate change only works if it's scalable. You know, if with most things, if you've got something that's kind of a unique selling point to your business, you kind of hide it, keep it secret, and work on it. And this was never ever going to be something that was just about braids. It had to go beyond braids and almost, you know, showcase to people, if we're a small dairy farm in Lancashire that can do this, actually, you know, it's something that everybody could become a part of. And actually, as an industry, it's a really positive thing for the dairy industry to take part in. So the next sort of move for that was to look at how we could scale that up. The initial model at the time was we went and did a lot of market research, and people were willing to pay a premium for that dairy milk because it had the environmental credentials. But as you and I probably know, what people say they'll do and what they actually do isn't always, it doesn't always go hand in hand. And also you've got the barriers as well of, actually, if a customer is going to pay more, to get that passed back down to the farmer, you've got to go through your distributors, you've got to go through your processors, and that's a hurdle that also is perhaps too big a risk for farmers to take if they're going to invest in a food supplement to do that. So we sort of gave that advice to Mootral, and in fairness to them and to give them complete credit, they went back to the drawing board and came up with a methodology that could be used to generate carbon credits. So we are the first dairy farm to produce carbon credits from methane reduction that's come as a result from the feed that we've been using. And so that sort of kind of, it gives it a real scalable opportunity there, because as much as people want to do well for the environment, and you know, they perhaps have a really big you know, target on their hand to reduce their emissions to net zero by a certain date, if it's going to come at a risk to your business, you know, it's if the whole business goes under, you're not going to do anything for the environment by that happening. So it was a really, really exciting development within that, that makes it a really good, plausible solution for farmers to take up. I know that I'm sort of coming towards the end of my 15 minutes, so there's a lot that I can sort of say about it, really. But I suppose one of the exciting things is that we've found is that as farmers, you have got a lot of opportunities out there. You know, you're almost like the catalyst that can create changes for climate change. And also, you know, there's a real opportunity here for farmers to keep an eye on things like carbon credits as almost like an alternative income stream as well. And just as you've had, John and I were talking to people recently and saying that just as we've looked at milk quotas, and we have experts sort of looking at the opportunities that's coming in through that, actually in the future we do sort of predict that looking at carbon credits and sort of opportunities for that, there's possibly going to be like the Ian Potters of the world, sort of talking about carbon, and for farmers to keep an eye on that, almost, you know, of things that they could get involved in. So yeah, so it goes beyond us. It's an exciting solution, and I suppose to leave you with an example, so if we were to get Mootral into the supply chain and feed it to all the cows, I think there's 1.5 billion cows here, you would reduce the carbon that comes out of that. It's the equivalent of taking 330 million cars off the road for a year. So it is a really exciting solution, and is a plausible one for people to take up. So I suppose that's sort of my bit really from there. I'm sorry, yes, no, I've totally missed my slides from this. So,
I just want to say thank you so much, Kim, for what a powerful message that is. And then I love the imagery about the CO2 spelling out the cow. I think that's a really clever way to do that. It's also very interesting that you are seeing this not being in competition with everyone, but seeing something that could actually at scale make a difference for the industry. So thank you very much to you and to your pussycat who joined us for a short period.
Sorry, it's just totally thrown me.
It is the wonders of Zoom, isn't it? So I do realise that we are probably at time, but people are very politely staying in the room. So I just want to pick up on some questions. There's one that probably Jane touched on, but maybe Jane and Kim could talk about how can we change this reputation that farming is the worst possible thing for the environment?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, I think you're the better place.
I think there's so many, because for me, the more that I've been researching about climate change, I mean, it paints a really bleak picture when you sort of go down that rabbit hole and you feel quite passionate about it. You know, we read in the news and things day in, day out, you know, you start to look at it and feel a little bit like it's such a big issue that what on earth can you, as a little individual farm or something, you know, how can you possibly be able to impact a change on something that's significant? And there's, I think for me working on this project, it gives me a lot of optimism and hope, because actually one thing that, so number one, because of Mootral, I know that actually, I do believe genuinely that it is a good solution. You know, if you could reduce everything by 30% in a supply chain, that is quite significant. It's not going to solve it on its own, you know, but it gives us a heads up. You know, it's something that we could do now. Also, the impacts happen very, very quickly. So you could get it into your supply chain and it would start making a difference tomorrow. And the thing that I feel really passionately about is that it doesn't require anyone to change any buying behaviour for it to actually work. You know, a farmer can still farm in the way that they do. The cows don't have any ill impacts. If anything, we saw a lot of positive benefits from there that I didn't really have time to go into. But if anyone is interested in, it's on our website and it's on Mootral's website. The customer can still choose to buy milk, and everything kind of remains the same. And a lot of the solutions out there, you know, at the moment that are viable and people can do, you have to change your behavior. And as we know, like as humans, it's really hard to do that, you know, and especially in environments at the moment where things are very volatile, you know, and people's incomes are becoming more stretched, you know. We've still got to feed the planet. You know, we've got a growing population that needs healthy and nutritious food, which I genuinely believe milk is a brilliant product for that. So, you know, things like Mutrel, and there's not just Mutrel on the market, there are other people that are looking at methane emissions and have really good solutions coming up there. It gives us an opportunity to start to put a little bit of a level playing field on there, you know. And I think, as you know, with more and more science that's being proved about that, I suppose we would sort of say, why would you not take up those opportunities? You know, it does. The model has been worked, so then it's been thought out, so other people, you know, everyone benefits from it. So for me, I think the more that we as farmers sort of come together and start to use those solutions, you know, that can only be a good thing for the image of the industry, and actually just for doing it, for farming, and feeling like you're proud and making a difference to do that.
Thanks, Kim. Jane, I know that you were talking about reaching out and building relationships with the public, and perhaps the public who aren't familiar with the processes. Is there anything that you wanted to add?
I just think that we need to shout about the good, really, and in every industry there's a rotten apple, or, you know, like, just because there's one bad dog owner, it doesn't make every dog owner a bad one, you know. And so I just think we need to not be scared of answering the questions and being honest about what we do, and until everybody sort of accepts that, we have got an uphill struggle, really. So I think it's really important that if anyone asks us a question, you give them the answer. I think you can't just hide behind, you know, and think this will go away, because it won't. It's really important. You know, the dairy industry is shrinking. You know, the number of farmers every day goes down, and so things like that Kim's talking about, that's massive. That's huge. You know, if something like that, that really needs to be shouted about. You know.
Yeah, thank you. That transparency helps, that honesty, yeah. And about all the good. Yeah. So going back to Lisa, a question that's been directly addressed to you, I think reflects how good you are at sales. Nena identified, she wanted to know about your pricing structure. So when you're talking about £130 a night, is that for the log cabin, or is it per person?
No, it'll be a nightly rate for the spaces. And
really, I mean, like that answer.
So it's such a variety. It's really hard to pinpoint, because I don't know if you've noticing from the slides, the variety of the spaces that people create on their land is just so immense that actually the price ranges can be quite extreme. And I just thought, you know, it's the things that really help people, the extras that can really boost that average nightly rate up.
Fantastic. Yes, the pricing structure for unique products must be tricky.
Yeah. We have a pricing analyst, so she deals with all of that. But it is very, there's a lot of variables that can change how much you can charge.
I need to draw this to a close, but I would really like to pick out on some themes that I've noticed from our panelists. I've really picked up on this idea about you doing things differently. With all of you, it has been also about considering the people you work with, and being considerate. And I see that all of you are problem solvers, that actually there are tricky situations that are placed in front of you, but you're responding to those by seeing opportunities. And also that you're taking responsibility for environmental factors and making ethical choices and living those ethical choices, which has really come across from each of you this evening. So thank you very much to each of the panelists. And I also would like to say thank you for Nina Oxley, who's been working from the H&H Group, who's working behind the scenes to bring this together. And the last pitch is just to draw your attention to the 10th Borderway Dairy Expo that's taking place on Friday and Saturday. Jane mentioned it briefly earlier. Jane is going to be one of our judges, and to celebrate our 10th Expo, Dairy Expo, all of the judges are female this year, and all of the stewards. So if anyone can come along to Borderway on Friday the 11th or Saturday the 12th, then I think it's going to be quite an event. Thanks very much, and good evening.
Thank you.